We're putting nearly $6 million more into vocational education, nearly $20 million into transportation to help cover increased contracts and fuel costs. A one-time infusion based on student enrollment to cover increased energy and utility costs. That's the $25 million number. And we're increasing the early learning component by $3.9 million. All of this spells relief to school district budgets and more money available for the classroom. So the total state-funded K-12 education, formula, and pupil transportation budgets for FY13 is $1.2 billion. Where do we stand as a state compared with others in funding K-12 education? Well, K-12 education funding is a big part of every state's budget. In Alaska, 21% of our budget's general fund operating dollars are spent on K-12 education and transporting students to their schools. In most states, depending on how it's measured, are about 20%. We're all right in the same ballpark. And in 30 states in the lower 48, education spending has dropped below 2008 levels. So even though costs have risen due to inflation, funding has been falling off in those states. But here in Alaska, state funding for education is increasing. I said over $150 million, with over $50 million of that directly benefiting the K-12 arena in the classrooms. On the veto side of the ledger, I did veto $66 million, largely from the operating budget. $50 million of that was a one-time lump sum payment to the judicial retirement system that I did not deem prudent given financial and economic considerations. But the budgets continue to make the annualized payment on the unfunded liability for PERS, TERS, and the judicial retirement system. We are making and we will make good on our pension obligations, and the budget does that. Now, you should have a handout on your tables that gives a snapshot of other priority areas for the budget. So I want to take some of my remaining time to discuss a couple other issues. One of significant importance to our state, bringing natural gas to Alaskans. Bringing natural gas to Alaskans and the markets beyond remains one of our highest priorities. Recently, we've seen a lot of natural gas in the lower 48 and a transition away from nuclear power in Japan. This means more opportunity. It means more opportunity for Alaska's gas in the Pacific Rim than we had in the lower 48, or than we had before when we were focused on the lower 48 market. In October of 2011, I put Alaska on a clear path to an LNG project from the North Slope to Tidewater, likely at either Valdez or Nikiski, but those choices still need to be made. We've made historic progress this year on getting Alaskans gas moving forward. For the first time ever, we got the 3 CEOs of the major companies together to agree to move forward on resolving Point Thompson litigation and on aligning themselves around a gas line project in the state. Next, we actually achieved resolution of the Point Thompson litigation, and we did so in Alaska's interest, requiring the companies to produce hydrocarbons from fields that should have been producing long ago. Point Thompson holds about 25% of the proven gas reserves needed to support contracts and financing. This is huge. It means billions more of investment dollars at Point Thompson in the next few years, like 1 to 3 years from now. It means Point Thompson related jobs. It means we are closer to the possibility of a large diameter gas line coming from the North Slope to have that litigation resolved. Then, after that, the 3 producers in TransCanada signed an MOU aligning their companies around moving forward on an all-Alaska gas line from the North Slope to Tidewater in Alaska. This historic alignment. It's historic because it's the first time in anybody's memory that we've had the 3 producers aligned with a pipeline company on a gas line. Producers working with an independent pipeline company. That's a first in our state. It's unprecedented. And TransCanada got its project plan amendment approved by the state so they can move forward on the all-Alaska private sector gas line. And I want to spend a moment talking about the Alaska Gas Line Development Corporation as well. They received funding in this budget of $21 million to continue their efforts. And why are their efforts important? They're important because they have done a lot of great work in the field on a line from the North Slope to Tidewater in this state. It's important that the state have an alternative. If you think for a moment about commercial negotiations and think about trying to buy a house, if you only have 1 house in the market to buy, you're going to pay top dollar for it. If you have 2 houses in the market to buy, the competition will drive the price down to beach. That's the notion behind why we need competing alternatives that could either merge together or be useful as alternatives. That sums up a little bit where we are in the gas line. I'll tell you that in my State of the State in January, I set some benchmarks for progress on a gas line. First, resolution of Point Thompson. Second, alignment of these producers around a gas line project in Alaska to Tidewater in Alaska. Third, discussions between the producers, TransCanada, and Alaska Gas Line Development Corporation to see whether they can bring those projects together and what each might have of value to the other that can be shared. And finally, by September, by the end of third quarter this year, project concept selection by what we call the MOU parties, the aligned parties between the producers and TransCanada on an LNG project in this state. That's a little bit of an updated synopsis on gas line. But on another topic, oil taxes. You kind of were wondering if I was going to talk about that. You know, after 2 years, thousands of hours of legislative work, thousands of pages of information and analysis, many Alaskans like you, many of you in this room, testifying in support of comprehensive change to Alaska's oil tax regime, we simply could not get 11 votes in the Senate for comprehensive tax change. What do I mean by that? Comprehensive tax change, meaning tax change to existing fields and tax change to new fields. To me, it takes both. We're going to be in a hard position to pay for any tax changes to new fields unless we have new production from existing fields. So we left at a place where we were stuck at 10-10 on comprehensive tax change in the Senate. We will continue to press the case for a competitive tax regime that brings more investment back to the state at these higher oil prices. And in closing, I understand this year marks the 97th year of the Anchorage Chamber. Think about that. It means your 100th year anniversary is right around the corner. 1915. Anchorage was basically a whistle stop on the railroad into Port Landing, perhaps from out of Seward at that time. You were here when this community was about a tent city along Ship Creek. And Anchorage had a population of 2,500 people. I think of people like the late Frank Reed, who came as a babe in arms to Ship Creek in 1915 and grew up to serve as president of this very Chamber of Commerce, who helped start United Way and who chaired the consolidation committee that led to the creation of the municipality of Anchorage, and so much more before he passed away in January of this year. We have a lot of history together in this town and in this chamber. People like Frank were pioneers. People like you are pioneers. People like Frank were business leaders and visionaries, as are you. Think about what kind of community you envision this being, as I know you do, as you approach your centennial as an organization. Think about what kind of a state we want to be. And I envision that, yes, our natural resources will be developed. They'll be developed for the benefit of all Alaskans. That, yes, our children will be better educated. Our families will be safer and have more opportunities. Yes, we will have more affordable energy and more plentiful jobs and opportunities for our youngsters, for our children and our grandchildren. And so with the Chamber, we're saying yes to a stronger economy and stronger families. I commend you for that, and I thank you for your dedication to those efforts and those principles. Thank you. I'm taking questions, but not from legislators today. Did enough of that recently.
Okay, well, thank you, and thanks again for a great update. First question is, break-even oil price for the state's budget is now approximately $104 per barrel. Next year, it'll be about $110 per barrel. What's the plan for addressing this looming crisis? I know you probably touched on a lot of these subjects you're going to get questions about, so it's just another chance to take a swing at it.
Well, it is. It actually sets up an interesting conversation because before, when we proposed the budget, it was about $97.50 a barrel. I have to talk with Karen about exactly where she's got her calculator out. So look at that. You know, the real issue is how do we create a situation where we are living within our means for the long term. That means if we're going to be dependent upon oil revenues for our means of sustaining ourselves for the near term, which is the way it appears we're going to be. Do you need something? Oh.
Oh, you had to pay attention.
If we're going to live on oil, that volatile commodity, we're going to have to set aside dollars in savings to meet those times when oil prices are low and as production declines. A couple things I want to point out. One is that as production declines, it's great while oil prices stay higher. Recently we've seen the downward tick. And so the thing I have been considering, and I'm going to just say it for the first time here, so think on these things. We could enter into a discussion rather than talking about how to increase production, because so far we've not been successful at getting increases to production, but we also need to plan for the expenditure side. And I told you about how we have kind of slowed down that tanker of state spending across the last 3 years. Another way to look at it is, what are our oil price targets that we're going to be living by? So if it's, and I don't have the exact number, but let's assume, I'll say 97.50 because that was in my head from before, but I suspect it's probably higher than that. Let's say it's $100 now. If it's $100 now, maybe our spending target should be 99, then 98, and then 97, and just start bringing it down. And that's a discussion that I'll need to have more publicly as well as with legislators. So the bottom line is, we have worked diligently. We've had some success at limiting the growth of spending, particularly when we've got these surpluses, so that we can save more for when oil prices are low.
Okay. And this is more of a statement, but it'll give you a chance to expand on the topic. And it states, as the parent of a recent high school graduate, thank you for your support of the Alaska Performance Scholarship. It was a big factor in my son's decision to stay in state this year and attend UAA. That's
significant, and that's one of the reasons why I work so hard, and our administration worked so hard to get those Alaska Performance Scholarships passed. I'm not one who believes in a handout, but I do believe in a hand up. And if we can create opportunities for our kids to earn a scholarship, what we find is that 70% of those who go to school in our state and who graduate from a post-secondary ed school, whether job training or university, 70% of them will stay in the state. That's not true for those of us of my generation who had the student loan forgiveness provisions of the Alaska student loan. We were at 20% or lower, people that came back, and we had a high default rate as well. This is just a smart way, I think, to keep more kids here, to increase academic achievement, and to create a workforce for the future that all of you can hire, knowing that they will have better training in the math and sciences and the skills needed to succeed in our global economy. So I'm just very proud of what the legislature has done in joining me in this, and in the opportunities we've created for generations now, given that we have a sustainable funding source for it, as well as the criteria for eligibility.
Okay. As governor, are you working to promote revenue sharing between Alaska and U.S. government on oil and gas development in the OCS?
Yes. There's no reason why Alaska should not share in revenues from the OCS on the same basis as other states. That's been an annual priority for our D.C. office and an annual effort in the Congress, both with the congressional delegation as well as combined with my office.
And with the potential of thousands of new jobs in our state from capital budget projects, what is the state willing to do to help working parents ensure they have quality child care?
One more time.
Okay. Let's just cut this in.
I was kind of in capital budget land, and then we went to child care. So, but I understand the connection and importance with it.
Okay, well, let's just go with the second part of it. Is what is the state willing to do to help working parents ensure they have quality child care?
Well, clearly the state already funds child care help for those in need or working poor. So those, I unfortunately don't have the numbers at the top of my head to address that, but as a parent I can tell you I know the responsibility lies on those of us who can provide it to make it happen, and we do, and that there's also a part for the state to play for those who need that kind of assistance on the lower income side.
Okay. And, when will the capital budget be released?
It's up on the web right now, folks.
Okay, we'll be adjourning lunch right now.
Everybody's running.
Yeah.